The story begins with the guy just walking down the street and suddenly saw something like a snake in the sky. An otherworldly creature began to approach him, exposing its huge fangs. Of course, the young man immediately decided to run away, but suddenly came across someone. He was a young man dressed as a cultivator who corrected that he actually sees a dragon in front of him. When our hero came to his senses sharply, he realized that it turned out to be just a terrible dream. He was very cold and wanted to eat, so he decided to go check how things were with rice, but he was not in the bag. Going to the bathroom in order to brush his teeth, he thought that he would buy something to eat a little later. After some time, going out into the street, the guy saw a stray dog tore the garbage bags to find a little food. This picture was not very pleasant for him, so he wrinkled his face. But still, the animal became sorry for him, so he decided to buy him food. Taking one of the dogs of the cannibal in the store, the young man was indignant to himself why they were so expensive. Therefore, his choice fell on ordinary sausages, which he immediately went to offer the dog. The animal happily took the treat, and the young man finally told him that he should not eat from the trash. By connecting the headphones to his phone, he drew attention to the fact that he received a congratulation on his birthday from the telephone company. When the guy got to his class, it turned out to be very noisy in it. Some guys took place online testing and discussed it loudly. A classmate who came across to him in the way greeted him and congratulated him on his birthday. Pulling out the headphone out of his ear, the young man heard someone discuss what he wanted to guess to the tarot. Other guys say that the predictions of this girl come true, it seems, her mother shaman. But the price is not small, as many as 10,000 won. Is it too expensive for this? Our hero noted to himself that she was well blessed. Such an amount for only one fortune. Telling. It is not surprising that to this day a bunch of charlatans in the world. How can you believe in this nonsense? If all this mysticism was true, then people born on the same date should have an identical character, did not. Suddenly, a strong blow flew to him on the shoulder, and a friend exclaimed that this was a congratulatory slap. While the young man was indignant at what it was just, the guy began to pour various kinds of bun on the table. Then he bowed and said to accept this modest gift. He did not know what taste he liked, so he bought a few different ones. Another classmate objected who generally gives bun for his birthday. The young man asked, and that such a slap and a bun is an ideal combination. Our hero immediately began to offer buns to others because he will not eat one so much. He noted to himself that the issue with breakfast was resolved. The guys were immediately happy and began to offer to eat pork cutlets after school. Someone objected what you had to think first before offering. He probably has a family dinner planned. Our hero asked who at all today spends his birthday with his family. Another classmate agreed with him, but added that he is still dinner with his family. Then another young man came up to them and said that they were careful today, since he dreamed of a broken tooth. This means that one of his acquaintances may suffer. Usually, all his predictions come true. The guys immediately decided that you could make bets. The guy exclaimed that, "Excellent," then he puts 10,000 on the fact that no one would suffer today. The other decided to go in the opposite way, so he said that he would put 10,000 on the fact that one of them would be injured. Following, our hero flew another blow, and the young man stated that he put 10,000 on the fact that Yeonjin would not be greeted today. Then everyone who stood around him began to do the same and say that they would make the same bet. The young man had no choice but to escape from them. The guys who wanted to catch up with the classmates stopped and stated that he put 50,000 on the fact that he would be in perfect order today. Going into the corridor, our hero thought that they were fools because this is a lot of money. Taking a step forward, he suddenly ran into some girl. She fell out of the hand of the map, so the guy immediately began to apologize and try to assemble them. The girl objected that she herself did not look where she was going. Raising everything from the floor, the young man handed her a deck and said that he seemed to have collected absolutely everything. Suddenly, the stranger took his hand and just silently froze in place. Yeonjin did not understand what was happening. Suddenly, the girl said that today he has a birthday, right? Let him choose some kind of card and she will guess it for free. Our hero said that he did not really love such things, but the stranger insisted. Then a young man with a broom appeared from the class, who stated that he should have escaped away. Now he will help him get hurt. His words did not inspire optimism, so the young man immediately continued to run away from them. When everyone dispersed, the girl noted that one single map remained on the floor. It turned out to be an image of death. Then the girl was hocked by the friends who were waiting for her to go on. After some time, Yeonjin listened to the monotonous voice of the teacher, who just put him to sleep. Then he abruptly came to his senses and turned to his desk neighbor in order to ask what page they are on now. But there was no answer, since the young man also slept and covered himself with glasses with the mask. After that, the young man looked at the window into the corridor and saw a huge dark shadow there. This was extremely scared by our hero, since he did not understand at all that it was at all. Suddenly, a teacher turned to him, who asked the name of the person who would stare at the corridor. The classmate replied that this is Kwon Yeonjin. When the teacher asked that perhaps they should open the window, and in the corridor the young man in horror began to say that he was not needed, because there was something there. But when he turned in that direction again, he didn't see anyone there. After a time when the change came, the guy left the office and thought about what the hell was. Suddenly, a blow flew on his back again, and someone exclaimed that this was a congratulatory slap. Yeonjin all this was extremely annoyed, so he exclaimed, "Who lost his fear there?" It turned out to be Chon Sihu, who said he was he. Then he asked when Sivon finally cuts through normally. Because of this hairstyle, he is even ashamed to greet him. Our hero thought to himself that then let him just pretend that he did not know him. What is the problem at all? The young man immediately asked what he made for his expression on his face. It seems to be so wanting to cut him. Suddenly, the same girl with cards appeared who asked who he was at all and why her boyfriend lifts her. The young man was surprised, in the sense of her boyfriend. He seems to understand that Lee Hisu just lost the dispute and is now completing the task. When the girl replied that it was really true, the young man asked what kind of nonsense then. Lee retorted that nonsense is his face. The young man stated that it seems he needed to retreat. Let it be forgiven if you offend. It turns out that Kwon managed to get a girl. This is very cool because, as far as he knows, then she is from a rich family. Unlike an orphan, like him. When he left, the girl asked if everything was fine that Chon even told him in his ear. Our hero asked what she was doing at all. They are not even familiar. Why was he called his girlfriend? To the question, what if the rumors creep, Hisu replied that she did not care. Then she invited him to meet. The young man asked if she did not fulfill someone's task, but the girl exclaimed that she really liked him. This all seemed suspicious to the young man, so he replied that he was forced to refuse and asked for forgiveness. But the girl was not going to give up so simply, so she appeared absolutely wherever our hero was. When she left him a packet of strawberry milk with a romantic signature, a friend asked to just admit everything honestly. He does not need to hide it from them. He meets her, isn't it? But the young man replied that this was completely wrong. From the corridor, there was a voice of a classmate who called out of our hero and said that his girlfriend had come. Going to her, the young man asked her to stop until she ran into rudeness. Lee asked not to tell him like that. The guy once again asked her to stop. To himself, she noted that she was clearly crazy. Hisu asked that he really hates her so much. Then she will try better. Yeonjin shouted that no better because they do not meet. The girl objected that she really likes him. The guy is all tired of it, so he replied that good. Now they will play according to her rules. The young man throws her right now. From now on, it is all over between them, and nothing else can be. After these words, the young man turned and left, and the girl in upset feelings was flooded with tears. On the way home, our hero corresponded in a common chat with friends who wrote that let him already admit that they had a relationship. Surely she has beautiful girlfriends. The guy replied that everything was completely wrong. There was simply a misunderstanding. Then he suddenly stumbled upon the very dog that he saw in the morning. The young man could not understand what she was still doing here. Does it really continue to eat garbage? Then he went up to his apartment and drew attention to the fact that heavy rain began outside the window. Therefore, of course, he went for a poor animal and took him to him. Then he began to dry him with a hairdryer. Then he came to the conclusion that since he had not left that place for so long, it must have been his owner before there, or he was just abandoned. Although perhaps the dog could never have the owner at all, and he wandered on the street all the time. Suddenly, the dog climbed into his arms and began to slap his chest with two paws. The guy shoved him away from him and was indignant at what he was doing. Today is directly full of surprises. While our hero thought that it was just, suddenly a knock on the door was heard. It was already too late for the guests, so the young man first decided to check through the eye who was there. When Kwon realized that Hisu was there, he opened the door and asked what she was doing here. The girl replied that she decided to play in a silly woman who came to her boyfriend who had thrown her. The young man immediately gave her a towel so that she removed excess water and handed an umbrella. On the street, on the road, the girl began to ask them to go under one umbrella as she was very cold. When asked where she found out where he lives, Lee replied that she had followed him. The young man was indignant that she was really crazy. What generally found on her in order to follow him all the way? Enough to carry all this nonsense already and let him say directly what she wants from him. The girl carefully looked at him with a crazy look and replied that she simply wanted him to herself. Our hero asked if she was really not friends at all. Let him just go home. He also noted to himself that it looked so easily accessible or something. When he was about to leave, the girl said that she was ready to pay 100,000 in an hour of time spent with him. Kivon replied that this was completely not funny. An ordinary schoolgirl does not have so much money. But the girl showed a mobile application from the bank where she had about 11 million. The guy shouted what was happening to her at all. Perhaps I reviewed teenage dramas. Suddenly, her parents recognize. The fan of, however, translated 100,000 to him and noted that she seemed to have not heard a refusal. The young man thought that maybe it was something wrong with him. The image of friends who were horrified that he sold for money immediately surfaced in my head, and they did not expect this at all. Then he said that they would take a walk only to the bus stop, and at school they would pretend that they do not know each other. The girl asked why. Is he really so afraid of various rumors? He would have agreed even without money in any way because he has no parents. Then she noted that it seems that it was his secret. Let it be a good boy if he does not want everyone to find out about it. The young man hissed to get out of here, and he would transfer money to her back. It seems that the girl does not see the boundaries at all. She can take this umbrella and say anything at school. He doesn't care about it. Hisu stated that he spit on money, spit on girls, all such a short term. But he will die anyway. He will die today. Her fortune, telling at the tarot, always comes true. A little later, he will definitely meet his death. The guy was indignant at what kind of nonsense. Suddenly, she began to wander and screamed, which was enough already. How he annoys her. All that he has is a miserable body. Where did he get so much pride in him? Then she threw the card to him right in the face and was indignant why he would still not understand anything. The body of a young man did not remain completely long, so let him give it to her. Then she sharply grabbed his hand and then pulled in such a way that he could not resist on his feet and fell to his knees. Suddenly, she turned into some incomprehensible creature with a large number of hands and asked that her hands froze, did not. This is all because he did not hold them. Our hero could not understand what was happening at all. This is a costume and a makeup suddenly appeared on it or something. The girl stated that she was asking for the last time if he would give her his body. Let him answer immediately. He has only 3 seconds. When the return counting reached the number 3, the guy rushed to run and she to catch up with him. While the young man was thinking that perhaps he was still sleeping, the otherworldly creature grabbed him by the sweater. The young man was very painful, but still managed to break out of her tenacious hands. After that, he realized that this was not a dream at all. If he gives himself to catch, he will definitely die. Then I ran into some small lane in order to take a breath. The distance between the walls was very small, so he hoped that here she would not get him. But suddenly, right above his head, was the same voice that asked that he was really thinking that he could hide from her. Yeonjin immediately began to try to get to his feet, but they did not obey him at all. The monster sarcastically said that the boy is very poor. Grew in a dirty basement room without mom and dad. He hid it from his friends because he was ashamed. What a miserable fate. The young man was just in despair, so he shouted to help him, at least someone. But there was not a soul around, so the other world said that no one would come to his aid. Let it just give up and stop tormenting yourself already. It will live this life instead of him. But our hero broke out again from his hands and rushed to run on. The monster again tried to catch him and shouted why he was so desperately resisting. Did it say that he would kill him? Let him just give this body. Sivyeon will not feel anything at all. There will be no pain, just like it was with Hisu. When the demonic creation tried to catch him, it was quite accidentally tearing off his hand. The young man immediately fell unconscious, and the monster muttered that he asked him to stop. Now he ruined it. This physical shell is damaged, as it is now going to correct this. Meanwhile, our hero tried to generally realize what had just happened. Is it really that he will die? If you think so, if he had at least one reason to live. Such a miserable existence, perhaps, is really better for him to die. And then he remembered how his classmate said that today his acquaintances could suffer. Perhaps in these superstitions there is still a piece of truth. After which the creature hung over him and stated that since his body could not get, then he would simply destroy. Suddenly, the little dog that our hero saved appeared and rushed towards the monster, after which he generally turned into a noble warrior who figured out the monster with several blows of the sword. Then he looked at Yonjin and said that now is the year of the dragon, the month of the rabbit, and the day of the dog. He congratulates on the birthday of his descendant. When the young man came from you, he noted that he was very hot and he was very sweating. And when I picked up my phone, I saw that it was almost noon. Did he sleep for so long? Then he began to recall all the events that occurred yesterday and looked in surprise at his hand, with which everything was in order. Now he did not understand whether it was all in reality. After some time, the young man got to school and could only think about whether Lee Hisu was at school today. Entering the building, he heard the conversation of two girls who asked each other whether they were aware of what happened to their Hisu. It is today that it is acutely necessary for her fortune. Telling. Then Kavon turned his head to the side and saw a girl with whom everything seemed to be in perfect order. Perhaps you should just come up and ask about yesterday. Suddenly, the voices of his friends were heard behind, who asked why he did not answer the messages. They actually worried about him here, and Yonjin first runs to his new girlfriend. They think that he just pretended to go home yesterday, but in fact he spent the whole evening with that girl. After the young man ran into her gaze, he immediately sat down on the floor. The guys were surprised at what he was doing. Is it really so worried before her that he cannot even look into the eyes? After a while, the guy thought that he remembered everything perfectly. The way he had a hand and this terrible pain, but does not remember what happened after. How did he find himself at home, in his bed, and what it was generally for the otherworldly creature? He was sure that yesterday's case was an ordinary nightmare. But in his mobile phone, there was a warning from the bank that Lee Hisu had translated 100,000 yesterday. Perhaps you should just ask directly, although, in the end, his hand is in perfect order. Do not make hasty solutions. After some time, Kavon accidentally collided with her and cried out in surprise. The girl asked for forgiveness and said that she did not want to scare him. The guy said that he was in the teachers, and therefore he was waiting for him here. The young man muttered that actually the bell had already rang. She was watching him or something. Then he noted that there was nobody around and offered to talk in a more crowded place. Not that he is scared, nevertheless, I want to play it safe. The girl exclaimed that he listened to her carefully. Yesterday, it was not her, but an evil spirit. This is all for a very long time. To begin with, she would like to apologize to him for the harm caused because she really is sorry. The young man interrupted her and said that it was somehow strange. But a statue that stood near the main gate somehow ended up here. Suddenly, she generally came to life and began to run very quickly in their direction. The guys immediately rushed to flee, and our hero shouted what was happening. Was it really some tricks again? But the girl replied that it was not her. The young man was indignant, which does not mean her because yesterday about the same thing happened. Eli said that she could explain everything. She really did not want to harm him at all. She simply took possession of the spirit of Sun Gaxi. The guy exclaimed that let him just run already. Our hero understood that. Then the creature was too fast, so he immediately scattered basketballs, which he came across along the road. But this did not help imperfectly, since the monster simply jumped high up and passed all these balls. When the girl stopped, the guy recalled that they need to get to a crowded place as soon as possible. Hisu took a handkerchief with some pebbles and quickly threw them towards the monster. But it did not work again, since the otherworldly creature simply began to beat them back. The young man screamed what she was doing. Then he began to push her to the open gate. When they quickly ran out and closed the passage behind them, the monster suddenly froze, and then he turned around and began to leave. The guys were surprised that did he really give up? But this turned out to be wrong. The statue just went to take the flagpole in order to rely on it and jump over the fence. Yonjin immediately grabbed the cart and began to scream so that the girl immediately climbed to the side. It so happened that the otherworldly creature fell right on her, the cart rose a little further, and the pillar crashed sharply. But even this did not help to neutralize the otherworldly creature, which slowly began to rise to his feet. Then it quickly approached our hero and then grabbed his throat tightly and lifted him into the air. The girl did not waste time and took out a bracelet that was made of walnuts. Then she threw it right into the head of the monster. From this, a powerful explosion came from. Since the young man fell to the ground from a height, she immediately ran up to him and asked if everything was in order. When they began to leave from there, the guy muttered that she should use that thing from the very beginning. Having wrapped around the corner, the girl took out a wand with incense and began to conduct a basic ritual. Then she bandaged his hand with some pieces of fabric and added that she did not need to remove until midnight. Having a small pause, our hero stated that she was really crazy. The girl noted that she understands his skepticism, but she really wants to help him. Then she offered to meet after lessons and she will try to explain everything to him. The young man replied that okay, it can be assumed that yesterday she was obsessed with some kind of spirit, and she was not starting today's pursuit of pursuit. From all this, we can conclude that he, being next to her, will continue to fall into strange and dangerous situations. Lee tried to object that this is true, not because of her. But the guy interrupted her and said that he was grateful for the fact that she had saved him today. But none of this would have happened if he had not begun to contact her. So please, you need to stop their strange communication. After some time, when our hero was already getting home, he saw the very bandage that Hisu made him. Then he sharply threw it away, threw it into the garbage bucket, and thought that she had it on my mind. When he entered his room, he screamed in surprise when he saw a dog on his bed. Then he calmed down a little, because actually he himself brought her home and asked if he was here all this time. Then he came to the conclusion that the animal was clearly hungry, so he put the sausages to him and he lay on the bed. Suddenly, there was a voice that was indignant that again, the same thing. Let him finally bring normal food. He was very hungry, so this time he would close his eyes. What is generally looking for a young man now? The young man could not understand where this voice came from. But the interlocutor noted that finally Kvon hears him, let him turn around because he is in the room. The hero slowly began to reach our hero that it was the dog who says, since there was no one else in the room. When the guy took him in his arms and began to examine him from all sides, the animal was indignant that he allows himself. The young man could not believe that the dog was talking. It seems he really goes crazy, really become a schizophrenic. The dog noted that he was in deep perplexity. Perhaps this can be understood, because for him, everything happened very suddenly. Then, the doors of the chest of drawers unexpectedly opened, and clothes began to fly into our hero's face. It turned out that it was bloodied clothes, and one sleeve on the sweater was torn off. The dog immediately asked if he remembered what happened yesterday. Let him think why he's still able to walk, why still breathes after what happened. For him, this is all for the first time, isn't it? Okay, let him call someone else. For example, parents. He needs to figure out the situation, talk to his family. Yonjin replied that he had no one. The animal was surprised in the sense, does he really want to say that his whole family died? The guy asked what he had stuck with these questions. The dog clarified that about other family members, but the young man replied that he had not one. The animal thought to himself that, given that his strength helped him recover, he was unlikely to make a mistake. But what happened in general in the life of a young man during his absence? Then he asked that he would not even thank him for the salvation. When our hero stated that he was the same monster, the dog began to be angry and asked how it was in his mind at all. In fact, he is his ancestor. The guy muttered dumbfounded that he really wanted to say that Yonjin came from the dog. The animal got angry and called him a fool. Right now, he is not talking to this body. The man only uses him so that he can hear his voice. When asked why his mouth then moves, the animal answered, because it is in the body of the dog. The young man stated that, it turns out, he is a dog. But the interlocutor objected, which could be in the human body. Kivon replied that, okay, then it turns out that he was something like a ghost, what he needs from him at all. Carry out the rite to calm the soul or something. He has absolutely no money for this. If you need any help, then let him find another descendant. When the dog began to stamp on the spot, the young man recalled that the restroom is on the other side. But suddenly, the animal stopped and stated that therefore, his family no longer honors the memory of him. Yonjin was indignant that he had done it again. What other family? He said that he has no one, so he has no idea what he was talking about at all. The descendant turned to him and stated that everything was decided. From this day, the guy will help him. Kivon realized that he was about to stay with him, so he began to shake off the bed and say that he would fail. Having fallen to the floor, the dog was indignant that Yeonjin does this after he saved his life. What an ungrateful person. The young man replied that he was extremely grateful for this, but he was sitting with him because Kivon is a poor schoolboy and cannot afford to feed another mouth. He himself at the same time searched on the internet signs of schizophrenia. Suddenly the dog began to jump and bark loudly. The young man was surprised what happened at all. The animal reported that there is someone outside the window. The young man himself led him along. While the young man was indignant that there was enough to carry some nonsense, the dog grabbed his head and said that she had to go. They need to go outside since the creature stands in front of the entrance and doesn't move. Our hero began to try to remove him with one hand and said that he was finally behind him. But the descendant didn't stop, so he began to pull his head and scream so that he had already risen. Yeonjin did not remain anything but to obey. When he went to the door in the porch, he saw the same statue. The young man was horrified why the monster is here. The dog clarified whether he met him before. The young man explained that this is a statue from their school. She suddenly lived and became a monster. The descendant corrected him and explained that this was not a monster at all, but just a spirit. Spirits are able to instill in inanimate objects, so they exist in different guises. Countless such spirits live in this world. Let him just think about them as a part of nature. What he even angered him like that? Spirits are very sophisticated creatures. It is difficult to get out of themselves. When the young man replied that he actually attacked, suddenly the spirit broke the door from one blow. The dog shouted right away so that he would not sit at a loss, but immediately ran away from here. The young man wanted to ask him that he was about to do, but the animal ordered him to quickly run away from here again. Then, a strong energy began to come from him, and his ancestor hissed the statue. Does she understand at all to whom she crossed the road? From the outside, everything looked like a dog just bucks, so the monster threw him aside with one hand. When the ancestor overtook his descendant, he asked what in fact happened. The animal asked why he still did not run away. The young man replied that actually even 10 seconds did not pass. Yeonjin specified whether he was the one who saved him yesterday. Is it capable of it at all? The dog was indignant that he did not need to be rude. Suddenly, the otherworldly creature overtook them and quickly grabbed the young man. But the guy slipped out of the jacket in which he was dressed, and the statue began to try it on himself. The animal yelled so that it would quickly rise. Having finished dressing, the monster became in a position in order to develop maximum speed. Suddenly, right in front of our heroes, Lee Hisu appeared, which activated some kind of subject influencing the monster. It turned out that she turned on the powerful Buddhist Dharani on the column, 8 hours of continuous reading. An otherworldly creature began to burn almost instantly, and Kivon thought that his sports jacket would burn with him. But the monk's voice did not act on the monster until the end, so he came to his senses and rushed to attack the girl. At the last moment, our hero managed to push her away so that there was no direct hit. Once near the column, the monster immediately stepped on it with all its strength, without leaving a wet place. Then, he picked up a large number of stones and launched towards our heroes. The guys covered themselves with their hands as they could, but this did not allow themselves to be completely secured. After the attack ended, the young man drew attention to the fact that the girl was lying on the ground unconscious. When the young man saw that the other world was heading in their direction, he suddenly heard someone trying to turn on the lighter. The monster hung over the girl, holding a car in her hands, and she tried to set fire to incense. The young man did not understand why she was not running away anywhere, but decided that he had to try to help. On the way, Kivon shouted that the same ancestor forced him to leave the house, so let him help them. Covering the classmate with all his body, the young man came to the conclusion that this time he would definitely come to an end. Suddenly, he seemed to be in some parallel reality. There was nothing around, neither the girl nor the ancestor. Suddenly, there was a male voice that stated that the guy was clearly on the verge of despair. Our hero asked the question, "Who is he at all? What kind of strange clothes on him are generally?" The man asked that he could not even recognize him by his voice. Right in front of him stands his ancestor, whom the young man so desperately called for help. Initially, there were 12 gods. Among them, he is a god who dominates the dragons, and his name is Jin. The man will lend him his strength so that the young man can deal with the statue. After that, a weapon appeared in the hands of a young man with which his ancestor was so cleverly managed. After the young man struck, the car was instantly cut in half. When the young man fell to the ground, he himself could not understand that this had just happened at all. The animal shouted, which he was lying on the ground. Let him immediately rise to his feet. Our hero instantly obeyed him, but the problem was that the weapon was simply heavy. While he was trying to cope with him, an otherworldly creature darted in his direction, which pushed him with all his strength. The blow was so powerful that the guy was thrown aside like a rag doll. The dog immediately clung to the monster in the face and screamed so that Kevon attacked him right now while he was distracted by him. But our hero decided to just escape and shouted in the end that he believes in his ancestor. Unfortunately, the monster was not so easy to let him go, so she rushed after him. The animal shouted so that he immediately used his sword, which, in fact, the guy immediately did. Then the young man began, like a crazy one, to wave a tizak from side to side, which even put the statue in a stupor. The young man waved them for so long that he simply accidentally released the weapon out of his hands. Since Tesak flew off somewhere high up, the young man had no choice but to try to run away again. In the memoirs of the monster, fragments began to emerge about how it was generally originally created. He was created from a photograph of the famous athlete and was his perfect copy. But why it was made completely bald was absolutely incomprehensible. This was a favorite place for school children for photographs. Once, the same athlete from which the statue was created was even photographed with him. The woman admired that her son was also an athlete and his big fan. Thank you very much for serving as an example for their youth. Meanwhile, the young man stumbled and fell to the ground, after which he realized that he would come to an end now. But suddenly, the otherworldly creature simply ran past him, as if losing all interest in him. Having broken the barrier in half, he imagined in his head that he had come first to the finish line. And the same woman thanked him precisely that he shows a good example for young people. After that, the creature simply disappeared. And dumbfounded guys could not understand that it was just... The dog noted that it seems that he achieved his goal and was able to find a rest. As he said earlier, the spirits themselves are harmless, but only until they follow their rules. The rules depend on what caused the appearance of the spirit. Therefore, he asked what the guy angered him so much. After some time, the young man said that he hopes that the ribs were not broken, and his ancestor asked him to stop to whine at last. Then he moved his attention to the girl and asked how she feels at all. Suddenly, Hisu fell right in front of them on her knees and began to say that thank you a lot. He is the ancestor of Yonjin, isn't it? At this time, someone was engaged in the restoration of the area after the battle. The guys instantly renovated asphalt, restored the broken doors and broken trees. After the question that Li asked, the dog said that since she was able to hear him, she is probably a shaman. The girl replied that, in fact, not quite. She is still learning from her mother. Last time, he saved her from the demon Son Gaxi, and the girl immediately lost consciousness. She failed to how to thank him. Our hero asked dumbfounded if she also hears this speaking dog. A classmate replied that yes. The young man immediately exhaled with relief, which means this is not schizophrenia. When the animal asked how she realized that he was his ancestor, Hisu replied that they were very similar to each other. Yonjin was indignant that he looked like a dog. The girl specified, does he not see his ancestor directly in front of him? The dog immediately asked the question, unable to discern his irresistible beauty. He is already used to the fact that girls are blushing in his presence. The young man immediately put a mirror in front of him and said that beauty is a terrible power. At this time, the girl turned on the application on the phone and told our hero to look at the screen. There, he saw that ears and carrots in his mouth appeared on his head, and as if there was another person who was not visible next to him. Kevon immediately shouted with fright. The dog asked what he was satisfied with hysteria here. The young man did not understand anything, so he said that she just buggles the phone. Then he asked, didn't she have to go home anymore? After all, a late hour, already 9 o'clock in the evening. But the girl replied that she could not return home. The fact is that her mother is obsessed with a demon. It is strong enough to call creates like Son Gaxi. If she returns to that house, she will become obsessed and then come after him, directly as last time. The guy asked why exactly for him. The shaman answered because they need his body. After all, this is a wonderful vessel for such spirits. Then she scored water into a bowl and said that now she would try to explain it to him. It can be imagined that this completed bowl is an ordinary person and its bowl is empty. A huge amount of spirits with great joy would occupy such a pure vessel. Previously, she could not come up with a way to decompose everything and therefore was not able to explain to him. Simply put, the spirits need it. It is he who. The descendant got into the conversation and asked that he still did not understand anything. The guy is the reason for all recent events. The young man immediately began to recall how he accused the girl and said that all these oddities began to happen to him due to the fact that she was nearby, so let him stay away from him. The classmate approached the dog, sat down in front of him, and began to ask him for help. Jin noted that she said that her mother was a shaman. It seems that she worshipped the demons. Hisu explained that she did it unconsciously. Mom was an unknown fortune teller, but always with humility brought gifts and prayed. Once, having returned home, the woman said that she received a sacred spirit from the gods. After that, a wave of customers surged into their extremely unpopular temple. Mom became so popular that the queue of enrolled people stretched a year ahead. But the baby saw perfectly and knew that not the gods help her at all, but something terrible. When the baby asked if she was sure that the spirit she worships was a deity, the woman immediately hit her and said not to dare to blaspheme. In fact, it turned out that it was a demon. From that day, she made various attempts to expel him, but everything was in vain. He later called on the spirit of Son Gaxi on his own. The dog explained that her mother has a shamanic spirit, so ordinary methods will not work on her. But Jin will help her, because her courage is impressive. She tried to help Yeonjin, even exposing herself to risk. After some time, they were going to go to bed, so the girl took a roll of toilet paper and decided to use it instead of a pillow. The young man asked what she was doing. Lee replied that she would sleep. The guy specified why exactly here. Since she cannot return home, she really has no friends or acquaintances, but the girl replied that no one was completely. The young man remembered that girl with a strange thing on his forehead and asked, "Are they not a girlfriend?" Hisu replied that Son Gaxi was friends with her, not her. Our hero said that then she simply pretended and behaved with her as well as that spirit. The girl objected that she would not succeed. Then she asked if she could spend the night with him. She needs only an overnight stay. The young man did not have the conscience to refuse her, so he said that okay, but only overnight. There will be no service here. The dog stated that they were going to divide one roof into two. If they want, then he can leave them alone. The guy was indignant that he was generally carrying. Lee asked if he had any replaceable clothes. Any, even very old, will fit. Deep at night, when everyone was already asleep, the baby began to dream about how her mother cut her finger with a knife. The girl asked her forgiveness and begged to let her out, but the woman did not listen to her at all. She was very scared alone. Plus, everything still appeared a terrible look, an otherworldly creature who greeted her. The shaman seemed to be all worried about it again, so tears flowed from behind her eyes. Meanwhile, her mother was very angry and wondered where this girl had gone. Let him only dare to return to her. The next day, our hero woke up and immediately headed for the bathroom, where he found a girl who cleared her teeth. From surprise, the young man immediately slammed the door and Hisu shouted to him, "Good morning." After some time, Lee asked where he gathered. The guy replied that there was absolutely no food in the house. And also, the ancestor is very complaining about his diet. He completely does not like the food that he presents to him. The dog immediately noted that they need to eat well for the upcoming test. Let it cook at least 7 dishes, mainly using meat. To which I received an answer. Something else. The baby exclaimed that if he goes for groceries, she would go with him. The young man muttered that, let what he wanted, he was doing. On the way, the girl noted that he was very responsible, but the guy objected that he would not say so. In fact, our hero felt only a feeling of guilt, awkwardness, and embarrassment from the fact that he accused her of all mortal sins. Then, he still gathered his thoughts, called out a girl by name, and asked her forgiveness. The shaman didn't understand what he was talking about at all. The guy explained that he had accused her and spoke all sorts of nasty things, but as a result, it turned out that the whole thing was in him. And also, Thanks to her that, despite his words, decided to help the young man because this was not even her problem. The classmate looked at him under the hood and said that it was very brave on his part. Apparently, he was very worried about this. But everything is fine. There is no need to worry. Anyone in his place could come to this conclusion. In addition, now he himself agreed to help her, although her problems do not concern him. This is more than enough. The guy replied that she could rely on him. I thought to myself that, or rather on his ancestor. Already in the store, the young man asked why they had these sweets. The girl explained that if he suddenly falls sugar, they will be an excellent solution. The young man objected that he was actually not a diabetic. In addition, he has no money. Hisu replied that there is no need to worry about this because she would pay for everything. Let him believe that this is a fee for housing or payment for salvation from an evil spirit. Leaving the store, the young man thought that for the first time in his life he bought so many products. The baby said that she was ready to argue that he was cooking well, but the guy replied that she was unlikely to like it. Alois said that if he manages to make bad dishes using all these ingredients, then it will be impressive in its own way. Suddenly, they stumbled upon a classmate and there was absolutely nowhere to hide. The young man, of course, noticed her and muttered that this is the girl Yeonjin, what she was doing here. Our hero never occurred to nothing else except rushing to run away. Stopping, he thought that he completely forgot about Haesu, but she herself should get home. In the general chat, reports began to appear immediately that Joel met the girl of our hero, and she even shared sweets with him. The young man realized that he was unnoticed, so he sighed with relief and headed towards the house. Suddenly, he flew by a football with a ball right on the head, and he did not understand what kind of nonsense it was. Turning around, he saw a boy with 2 small children and asked if he had just left it. The stranger carefully looked at him and said that he was more careful. Our hero was indignant that actually he should tell him this. But the boy interrupted him and said that Yeonjin barely escaped. The children immediately surrounded him from all sides and began to say that it was dangerous. Let it be more closely, because they were very worried. The young man could not understand what was happening at all, but replied that he would try to take the ball with his head more carefully. Meanwhile, Hisu tried to find a young man and stopped in order to send him a message. But suddenly, some creature appeared behind her. When the guy returned home, the dog immediately asked why he came alone. Our hero first replied that she would return soon, but after about 15 minutes, he began to worry and try to get through to her. Since on the line, they constantly insisted that the subscriber was not available, he decided to go in search of it. On one of the streets, he stumbled upon a girl who said that he was looking for him too. The young man asked her forgiveness and said that he simply did not want to catch the eye of Joel. Lee asked, "And who is it?" The young man muttered that this was his friend, that guy with glasses. He probably would have started to get him. But then, Yeonjin drew attention to the fact that the inscription on the jacket was the other way around and, suspecting something was wrong, asked who she was at all. Suddenly, instead of a girl, an old man appeared and said that he was an old man with a bag, a character who steals naughty children. The ancestor hurried to his aid, but did not have time a little, so our hero simply disappeared. While he was angry with himself that he was late, a voice rang behind who said he looked good. How is he generally dog life? The animal noted that she sees Sedagam in front of him. The boy replied that they had not seen Jin for a long time. When asked what this was generally with his body, the boy asked, he really does not know, or just mocks. In general, let it answer better how the man managed to destroy the seal and get out. Jin replied, who knows? Maybe some of his people changed their opinion, or it was the god of heaven. Suddenly, the interlocutor took out the fan and began to wave them from side to side, activating his strength. After the influence of otherworldly energy, the ancestor took his true appearance. Chedagam said that at absolutely any moment he could break it and seal it again. Given his current state, his one will be more than enough. Again, put with the dog, Jin decided to ask the question whether he contributed to him to have such a body. Hiding his fan back, the boy in response asked the question, why would he not ask God the Sky about it? Even he never saw something like that. When the old acquaintance was going to leave, the animal asked why he was sealed. Really? Because they are afraid. Chedagam finally stated that he was a real fool, and then he just took it and disappeared. Then the kids immediately ran up to the dog and began to ask if he was looking for an older brother. The fact that in black clothes and with disheveled hair. so they can help him because they know where to look for him. When our hero came to his senses, he saw an old man who muttered that good children eat pies. Here's the tiger with a tearful, and put the bad in a bag. The young man drew attention to the fact that next to him was Haisu, which was all in tears. The old man continued to mutter that bad children had to be salted, after which he poured a hill of salt next to the guy. And then from them, you can prepare chotkal, so-called saline delicious food. The girl seemed to be delirious and muttered the same thing for the fourth time, namely the fact that he is going to make a dish from them. The young man immediately looked under the fabric and saw that he was completely without clothes. The baby said that she was also naked, so let her not look at her. When the room became suspiciously quiet, the young man turned his head to the side and saw an old man right in front of him who stated that a bad boy woke up. The appearance of the creature, of course, scared him. But our hero asked why he took that Yonjin was bad. The girl exclaimed that it was, "They are actually good." And the old man said that good children eat pies. Where are their pies? Suddenly, the man looked at them and asked how they're going to prove what they are good. The young man clarified, but how he's going to judge whether they are bad or still good. The old man replied that he would decide whether they were respectful of their parents. Let them try to convince him. When the young man replied that he had no parents, the creature yelled that it was simply unforgivable. How he dares to renounce his family. It was decided a man will immediately prepare a salted dish from him. The baby was indignant that he actually was telling the truth. The monster said that she would also go to Chotkal. Reflect from your parents is the same as killing them. Then he yelled that such a sin was unforgivable and waved a knife. But the young man immediately said that they died. The man immediately stopped and stated that then only the girl would go to this dish. Her mother prayed every day, said that her daughter was very naughty, so let her grandfather Mangta take her. When the baby tried to explain that her mother was obsessed, there was a knock on the door. Therefore, the old man told them to lie quietly, and he went out to see what kind of noise was there. Taking advantage of the moment, the guys managed to kneel. The girl immediately looked around and stated that it was their temple. CVON immediately exclaimed that they were specifically hit. The girl objected that they still planned to come here. Our hero asked what they could do without an ancestor. Baby objected that he could urge the sword, but he replied that he was staying at home, like Jin. Hisu asked in surprise if he should not appear, he should only wave his hand from side to side. The guy asked her not to speak stupid things and began to ponder the plan of action. If they go out at that door, then they risk stumble upon an old man. It turned out that there was another way out in the room as the baby called him and said to follow her. The appearance of the room struck our hero, so he began to look around and mutter how many relics are there. The girl led him to the closet and said that you could change clothes for a start. It is very inconvenient to walk in these bags. Throwing a robe over himself, the young man asked how they would come out in a similar form because they are too easy. Li said she would call a taxi. Then she pointed her finger at the door and said that there is a backyard through which you can leave. The young man was abruptly uneasy since he noticed that someone was on the other side. Without thinking twice, the guys immediately hid in the chest of drawers in order not to catch his eye. After a while, when it became suspiciously quiet, the guy opened the cloak and saw a woman's face straight in front of him. Then he sharply closed the doors and said that it seems that they had two to an end. The girl at first did not understand why he says so until the door opened completely and her mother appeared. The woman immediately began to pull her hair and screamed that if she had already returned, she could say hello. After all, she was worried. Then she glanced at our hero and noted that she also brought her friend with her. The guy immediately began to get out of the chest of drawers on his own, after which he stated that he was urgently called home, so it's time to go there. Then he looked towards Hisu and said that he was not remembered at all. She could not have been conducting it. After that, he began to push the girl towards the exit and whisper so that she would move. Suddenly, there was a voice of her mother, who stated that when you meet the parents of a friend, it was necessary to greet them. He was not taught this in childhood. Then some otherworldly creatures began to grab the young man. The woman laughed loudly and said that there was no need to resist. They still cannot get out of here. Suddenly, an old man appeared in the room who asked what was happening here. Hisu's mother said that grandfather had already completed her task, so it could be free. The old man stated that it seems the truth was mistaken and these children are good, but their mother is bad. And bad parents are the worst punishment that can be for children. The woman said that it seems he did not understand something. Is it in the know at all why it is still here? Now she will clarify the situation a little. After that, the grandfather began to attack an unknown force. The man was indignant at how she dares to treat him like that, but was quickly sealed in a vessel. Then she moved it into a clay pot and stuck a sticker in order to seal it. Then she stated that sometimes old people are not suitable even for the simplest work. What is the use of them if they still do not obey? Then she turned to the otherworldly creatures who overwhelmed our heroes and asked if they had already reached. Suddenly, the young man began some clouding of reason, and the mother sarcastically asked what was the matter. He said that he was in a hurry to go home. The guy barely muttered that he had no strength left. The girl noted that it seems to be all because of these children. The woman came closer to him, pushed her foot, and once again asked why they were leaving. The baby screamed in horror that, "Please, I don't need to do this, mother." The spirit turned to her and stated that she should perfectly understand that she was not her mother. Therefore, let him close his mouth until it was welded alive. When the woman began to say that she really finally succeeded, the doorbell rang. While she went to deal with the guests, the guys lay and thought about how they managed to get so. Kivon said that the girl has a very frightening mother, but she objected that this is not her mother. The real one is a very good person, very kind and caring. She never scolded her. Then she muttered that let her forgive her because he was in such trouble because of her. Probably, now she seems to him selfish and very problematic, right? The guy objected that no, but if he cry, he will definitely become uncomfortable. But the baby still burst into tears and said that she was very sorry that it happened. The young man asked her not to cry and stop apologize. Everything is not so bad. But Hisu could not calm down and muttered that everything was very bad. She initially did not have to draw him into this. If you do nothing, then she was afraid that she could forever lose her mother. The girl with her own eyes saw her body began to rot. It cannot keep a demon in itself for so long. When asked why she decided to say this only now, the baby replied that she did not want to burden too much. This all happened before that spirit dwells in it. Suddenly, his mother could not be saved. The young man asked her not to say all sorts of nonsense and stop apologizing for this already. After that, he asked if there were generally any restrictions on moving. The baby first did not understand what he was talking about. The young man explained that if the problem of the spirit is only that the old body is rotting, he could just move to her, for example, the body. But instead, Son Gaxi gave way. Hisu remembered how the demon muttered that ordinary human bodies were too weak. He needs a divine vessel. He seems to need his body as a vessel, whether deities were in his family. Perhaps his ancestors were endowed with a special gift, something passing from generation to generation. Our hero replied that not at all. They would first come up with how to get out of here. Then he dawned on him that the forces began to return a little. Let him also try to move. The baby was still hard to move, but the young man had already managed to sit down. Then he told her to grab his shoulder in order to help her rise. But his companion did not even succeed in moving, she just pulled off his robe from him. Suddenly, an ancestor appeared in the doorway who stated that he had finally found them. The kids still appeared after him. Some of them laughed, and some covered their face with their hands and were indignant that he was naked. After that, they threw the very weapon in the direction of our hero that helped him more than once. Since the young man was practically exhausted, he barely managed to catch him. To himself, he noted that this baby threw such a huge one so easily that it was generally for children. The little girl went to Hisu and stated that she was also a shaman. Whether she needs any help, maybe help to get up. Then she got into the girl's body in order to help her leave this place. When Hisu began to ask them whether she waved it cool, our hero suspected something was amiss. The young man immediately began to ask what was happening at all. Is everything all right with her? Jin explained that it has the spirit of one of the children. The girl is not yet able to move her in her body, so for her a sovereign spirit does it. They are heavenly creatures, so there is no need to worry. Watching the horde, who was looking for sweets, the guy muttered that he was saying not to worry, but unless they should behave quieter. In the meantime, the woman told her guest that when she went to bed, let her put this vessel next to the bed. But you can't look into it for anything. The client thanked for all her mistress. Then Hisu's mother began to blow in her direction, and the otherworldly creatures who sucked energy immediately disappeared. The woman noted that for some reason, after talking with her, she always becomes much easier for her. She immediately feels better. The shaman explained that she restrained the severity accumulated in her with her energy, so there is no need to relax. If this does not work, then they will have to conduct a ritual. When asked how much this vessel costs, the woman replied that he was free, because she was trying to help her. What to take money from her once again? Only a consultation fee is charged from it. The guest sincerely began to thank her. Following, Hisu's mother reported that next time she will not be here. Instead, a young man will sit here. She can safely contact him. This is due to the fact that she needs to spend some time in the mountains for prayer. This guy is young, and he already has a very strong spirit. The guest objected that she did not think that there would be someone more capable than a lady. The woman replied that let it just think that not he was sitting in front of her, but she. They serve with him the same to God. When there was some kind of noise behind the door, the client asked if she was waiting for someone else. The woman replied that no. She just has a cat, and he often arranges a mess. Probably saw the mouse. At this time, one of the kids said that the other was more careful. He apologized and promised to put everything in his place. When Buksuni, who got into Hisu, reached for one of the vessels, the boy abruptly stopped her and said that she would not even think. Let him immediately get away from there. But it was too late, as the girl hooked one of them with her hand. Then a powerful explosion occurred. Having fallen to the ground, Lee could not understand that it was just. Suddenly, our hero began to rush in her direction, who screamed to leave the road. It turned out that the otherworldly force hung over her, which pulled her hands in her direction. The young man arrived in time, and he managed to destroy the monster from one blow, which appeared from a clay pot. The kids admired such an instant reaction, so they looked fascinated in that direction and clapped their hands. Suddenly, a female voice was heard behind, who stated that a lot of mice made his way to her today. Then she turned to our hero and came to the conclusion that he had already completely recovered. He is a vessel that is able to accommodate God. How can you be so perfect? All the rest should have been behaved very quietly, but it turned out that they were too stupid. After which she began to call for undeniable souls that feed on human energy. But the baby was materialized in front of them, who stated that he would not allow her to take control of children's souls. Others picked up that she was doing something very bad here. Is that? And this is appropriate to the shaman. This is characteristic only of those who have a very weak spiritual power. Having demonstrated the missing fingers at the souls, the boy menacingly asked where they went. Let him answer immediately. Suddenly, a client appeared in the room, who asked what was happening here. Sharply, the clay pot, which was in her hands, exploded, and an otherworldly creature appeared from him. The monster immediately headed towards our hero and shouted that he would necessarily belong only to him. But he was instantly destroyed by his mother Hisu, who was indignant. How he dares at all, he got drunk on someone else's body. Suddenly, heavenly perfumes gathered around her and began to mutter something. The woman did not understand what was happening. Then she let her blood out of her finger and asked that they were really hoping to take her something like that. All its existence is based on hatred. She is her direct incarnation. Unconscious rage. Such pampered little flowers will never have enough strength to curb it. Plunged into the abyss of despair, from time to time, she shows this world with curses, persuading only pure anger. However, they have enough stupidity to appeal to the gods. It seems he wanted to know where their fingers are. Then she opened her mouth and demonstrated that absolutely everything is there. Then she began to laugh loudly, and all the restless souls began to slide in her direction. On the way, something inexplicable began to happen to them. They all turned into real monsters, right in front of everyone. The boy shouted that only this was not. Children who have turned into demons will never become flowers and will no longer meet their parents. The little girl screamed that it was impossible. It's too cruel. Let the children come to their senses. They still have to return to mom and dad. The woman was tired of listening to all this, so she set the otherworldly creatures right on her. The kid shouted that she really thinks that she would get away with her hand so easily. As soon as their brother comes here, she will end. Hisu's mother only amused these words, and she said that let her come. The woman will send him straight behind them. Then she went to our heroes and stated that now nothing would interfere with them. You can return to what they stopped at. This will not make some deity out of it, but she will rise much higher than miserable gods. But suddenly, a test flew right by her, who hit her hand a little. Then there was a voice of Jinn, who asked what kind of nonsense it was. Where in this small bug there is so much conceit. She does not even have the right to pronounce this word with her dirty lips. Seeing a dog in front of her, the woman was very surprised. But she was more surprised by the fact that her forces did not act on her. Therefore, instantly came to the conclusion that this is clearly not an ordinary animal in front of her. Slidefully noting that did his appearance really misleaded, Jin took his true appearance and said that she was in the presence of God. The woman was at a loss and muttered that she really was the truth in front of her. He stated that she finally saw him. But she just began to laugh loudly and say that he is funny. Let him go away if he does not want to die like a dog. Judging by the appearance, a man is only one of the lower military commanders. Our hero watched this all and did not understand why the young man just stands. Hisu's mother continued that, even if he did not even think to crank up anything. The young man replied that he just thought about what to do with her. Yeonjin thought that the ancestor really expects any actions from him when he was in this state. Suddenly, the woman said that if he is really a god, then it would not be difficult for him to reflect this simple spell. The energy flow was so powerful that he threw the dog aside and she hit the wall. The demon sarcastically asked where his whole strength went. As she thought, this is only a miserable dummy. If Jin really was a god, then he would have long expelled her from the body with this woman. However, not one god would instill a dirty dog. After which she turned to our hero and asked that, is it all that his saviors are capable of? In this case, let it just be a good obedient boy and give her his body. It was then that she will spare all his friends, and resistance will only lead to his meaningless death. It seems that the young man does not have any other choice. Yeonjin replied how it is not, he can still die so that she does not get anything. The woman suggested checking it because she can take his body a moment before his breath breaks off. Now her turn has come to rise. Suddenly, Hisu grabbed her dress by the hem and began to beg to stop, because enough. Let him leave the body of her mother. She tried to reach out to her mother, but it didn't work. The evil spirit only pushed her away from himself. Then the demon began to say that she really thinks that she was left alive out of pity. She still breathes only because she was useful to him. But now, when there is no more benefit from her, it is time to die. Let him not be afraid, because she will send her mother after her. The young man could not look at this calmly, so he realized that some actions needed to be taken. At this time, the real mother of Hisu began to remember how she handed her a bracelet and said that it was made of peach bones. Children now love to wear bracelets, right? The girl asked how to wear it because he is too large and ugly. The woman explained that the demons would not touch her with him. The baby said she did not want to. She is already teased that she is the daughter of shaman, and now it also needs to be worn. Also, let him stop putting the amulets in her backpack. One of them rolled to the floor right during the lesson. Because of this, it can become an outcast at school. Other children live happily and without all this shamanism. Why they can't do the same? This is very infuriated. The woman asked how she was such a talisman. The amulet from my mother's love. Wherever she is, and no matter what happens, let him just say a word, mother. After that, the daughter will feel a warm hug, which means everything will be in perfect order. The woman had tears on her cheeks, and she managed to restrain the demon a little, so she said that her daughter immediately ran away from here. Then she went to take one of the knives and directed it towards her chest. The girl sobbed and begged her to stop. No need to do this, please. The woman was able to say only one thing before her death. She asked for forgiveness for everything from her beloved daughter. When a woman fell to the ground, the baby immediately ran to her, began to shake and call, but she did not respond. Our hero was shocked by what happened, and recent events began to scroll through his head. Exactly the fact that all this happens because of him. Only he is to blame for everything. He should not have been born. Parents died because of him. Suddenly, an otherworldly creature began to appear from the woman's body, which was screaming that she was crazy and what she did. Then he swung in order to destroy the daughter of this naughty vessel. But unexpectedly, the demon felt that one of his hands instantly disappeared. It turned out that it was chopped off by our hero, who looked completely different. A powerful energy was hung around him. The evil spirit screamed that they had all lost his mind. Did everyone have lost fear at once? While the monster screamed how he dared to do this at all, Yeonjin materialized behind him. Then he struck, but the demon managed to dodge, so only his beads were torn on his neck. By bouncing to the side, the evil spirit could not understand that it was just how he took off his spell. An ordinary person is completely unable for such a thing, so who is a young man then? After that, the undisputed souls that tormented heavenly spirits began to dissipate. Everything was in order with them, but immediately noticed that Hisu's mother died. Meanwhile, our hero again rushed to the attack on the other world in order to end him. The young man did not listen to all the stinging comments that came from the demon and simply silently attacked over and over again. Having bounced to the side, the evil spirit said that it seemed that he was not so simple for nothing, but he was still a miserable little man. But our hero only began to grin, which completely put in a monster stupor. Without thinking twice, she grabbed a pot with one of the sealed spirits and threw towards Yonjin. When the young man broke him, a lot of scolopendra began to crawl along him, which later turned into one huge insect that was ready to attack. The demon gloated that this was not an ordinary evil spirit, but a K artificially created from his poisons. Does the young man believe that he can cope with such an otherworldly being? To herself, she noted that the young man is stronger than she expected. It is necessary to use the moment and take the vessel. Therefore, I decided that the best option at the moment would be to occupy the body of her client, who was unconscious. She did not like her at all, however. While she is in the human body, that guy would not dare to attack her. The demon had not even managed to begin to shake the soul as he heard a powerful explosion behind himself. It turned out that the creature created because of its poisons was destroyed in the blink of an eye. The monster was first surprised that he was defeated by only one blow, but then began to laugh and say that he was amazed at his ignorance. The more often the young man will cut him, the more new bodies he will grow. Then she reminded her creation that it is impossible to kill him. It is only necessary to immobilize. Indeed, in order to get out above God, she does not need his body as a vessel. But suddenly the evil spirit again began to hear strange sounds, so he turned around to see what was happening there. It turned out that a K was destroyed by exposure to powerful energy. This already really frightened her, because she did not understand at all that it was just. Really, the young man has just absorbed the creature that was created from its poisons. Jin decided that it was time to intervene, so he went to our hero and called him by name. But the guy only sharply waved his weapon, which stopped a millimeter from the dog's muzzle. The ancestor didn't understand at all that it was just, but he realized that it was better not to touch him now. The otherworldly creature in horror watched him and wondered that he was at all, because this is clearly not a person. The best way out in this situation was to try to escape. What the evil spirit took up. When the demon was on the street and salvation was already very close, our hero still overtook him, after which the young man put his foot on his head and began to crush with all his might. The other world had nothing to breathe at all, so he began to choke. Only the fact that he is God flickered in his head, and he could not be treated like that. And then, memories from a past life began to appear when everyone worshipped her. The woman said that all perfumes were satisfied. Therefore, tomorrow it should definitely rain. But the next day, nothing happened. So she began to be very nervous and wondering why this is happening. This situation extremely posed her, so she shouted that there was absolutely no sense from her. She doesn't succeed at all. She cannot even convey the will of spirits. Why so? Perhaps the gods do not exist at all, but initially, it was her own gift. Meanwhile, the men discussed that, it seems, the gods turned away from that shaman. They say that she even scattered ritual things. There was something wrong with her from the very beginning. Suddenly, behind him was materialized by a woman who stated that the disease would come to his house soon. To avoid trouble, let him bring the chovan bag of rice. The guy exclaimed where to get a whole bag. Her had the food ended or something and therefore decided to rob him. The interlocutor tried to calm him down and said that she was trying for the sake of their village. But the man did not calm down and shouted that there was a fool that she was an ordinary charlatan. A miserable girl settled with them, showing a couple of stupid tricks. Now he also sends curses. Better to leave here, as it only spoils your appetite. The woman hissed how he dares to insult the one that conveys God's will. Isn't he afraid of heavenly punishment? The man was indignant at how to know what the gods want. The whole village sees it through. The shaman said that soon the disease would take his life. After some time, he really was gone. People discussed that. They say that he insulted their shaman and the gods punished him. The woman warned him about the upcoming illness and even ordered him to bring a gift, and the disease really came. Not only he, but also his wife with children, and others turned to the shaman in time, so they recovered. It is incredible, but there were rumors that her power disappeared. what they will not come up with, and she also heard that the Pak family recently held the Samson family. As possible, they, after all, sobbed recently that the tiger dragged their son. Why do they even want Samson at all? They want to quickly conceive a new one. How restless is. Around tigers and illness, it will be necessary to go to the shaman for prayer. It is not clear why the tigers so often began to take off babies, so we need to closely monitor children, especially at night. After a while, the inconsolable mother screamed the name of her child. It turned out that her child was gone. They said that it was better to watch children because there are tigers around. On the other end of the village, the woman asked the exhausted child if she wanted to eat. When a hungry baby began to pull her hand to the liver that she was given, the woman swung an axe. The killing of an innocent child was not unnoticed, since a little girl looked into the ajar door and saw everything perfectly. The woman began to walk around the house and asked where Donna went. It is dangerous to walk around at night because tigers are everywhere. The baby was hiding in a jug, all trembled with fear and tried not to make a sound. The next day, during the next prayer, a baby approached the mother, which did not appear for a while. The woman could not restrain her emotions, so she burst into tears and began to tightly press her to her. When the baby began to ask where she went, the child pointed her finger towards the shaman. Armed with torches with fire, the locals immediately headed to the place where she lived in order to explore everything. The one saw shocked them. In one of the bamboo vessels, they found a chopped finger of a child. People did not think for a long time and decided to burn her at the stake. Everyone shouted that she was a witch, a devilish spawn, and took their children. The shaman hissed that they arranged for the circus because they themselves wanted it, not she. For the sake of their greedy desires, they were ready to sacrifice even with their own liver, even with their hearts. Now these children have disappeared because of their greed. The locals shouted at her and called her a damned witch. At least before his death she was afraid of God's punishment. The woman screamed, "What kind of nonsense? If their gods really exist, then how they allowed the death of these children?" The people, distraught from grief, began to throw torches in her direction, but her mouth did not close in any way. The shaman continued to broadcast that their gods did not exist. However, she is real. Then she hissed that they were all cursed, each of them brought to himself the wrath of God, for she is God. Then, in real time, she screamed, so that the one who devours the light immediately appeared. Now she will demonstrate his personal divine court to the young man. The evil spirit will kill each of them. No one in this room will survive. The one that this world hears by the power of the word, she calls on her whirlwind of destruction. The guys first shouted to our hero so that he was more careful, but then noted that he seemed even more sinister than she. The young man, all her threats did not scare at all, so he immediately rushed at her on the attack and chopped off part of his hand. The otherworldly was still not going to give up, so he attacked him with her unknown force. Meanwhile, an ominous aura appeared around our hero, which in its form resembled a dragon. All those present did not understand what was happening at all, so they only silently watched what was happening. Suddenly, someone third intervened in their fierce battle, sounded spells of icy wind and thunder wisdom. It turned out that it was a cheetagum, which immediately began to seal their ominous, powerful power. The children immediately began to flee in his direction and confusedly tried to tell what only happened. Then they paid attention to what remained of an evil spirit and froze in surprise. An otherworldly creature crawled in his direction and asked who he was at all, how he manages to use the power of the gods. The boy carefully looked at him and replied that because he is God, or rather a celestial. The monster grabbed him by the hem and began to ask him to answer him why he did not hear his prayer then, why never responded, and more importantly, why he allowed him to die. Should the gods not protect those who pray to them? The boy squeamishly pulled out his cloak from his hands and asked what she was talking about at all. Is it possible to boast of a prayer that she said only out of her own greed? Not one god will never pay attention to such a call if she didn't know this. Blinded by instant benefits, she completely forgot about her shamanic duty and committed indelible sins. When the evil spirit muttered that it was unfair, Cheetagam asked, "But how are all these innocent souls that she ruined? Even if he breaks her body 1,000 times and burns him to the ground, this will not satisfy the fury of her victims. She will survive hellish torment as many times as she managed to take away children's fingers and how many people caused pain. Let him immediately suffer Ka for his mortal sins," after which he began to appeal to the cycle of the earth's branch. When it darkened around sharply, the woman began to ask for mercy, because she cannot die like that. She begs him, let her take pity this time and give her another chance, but the boy did not listen to her at all and began to impose a seal. When with an otherworldly being it was over, the guys returned to Hisu, who sobbed near her mother. Squatting around them, Chedagum stated that the woman was still alive. Then he began to appeal to the cycle of the Earth's branch and to the flower garden with the rebirth bud. A bright glow appeared around the woman, and her deep wound began to heal literally before her eyes. After the ritual ended, the boy said that there is no need to worry because she was just sleeping now. The kids immediately began to support her and say that everything worked out. Their older brother is a celestial, the first of the 12 Earth branches. For him, this is easy. The girl immediately fell to his knees and began to thank for the salvation of her mother. But suddenly, the boy replied that there was no need to thank him. Better to do one favor to him. When the shaman comes to herself, let him say that she collects the fingers of the children and conduct a rite to send the soul of the deceased to the next world. After Chedagum went outside, he saw our hero, who was in an unconscious state and restrained his strength. The young man immediately came closer, then turned to Jin and suddenly told him to get out of here. Then he touched Yeonjin's head with his fan in order to bring him to his senses. When our hero came at his place, he began to shake his head from side to side and did not understand where he was. After the force ceased to restrain him, the young man slapped to the ground and drew attention to the fact that almost everything around was destroyed. Suddenly, Hisu ran up to him, who took his hands by the face and immediately began to ask if he was in order. When the guy replied that everything was fine with him, the girl burst into tears and began to ask for forgiveness, since all this happened because of her. When asked what's with her mother, the baby replied that everything was fine. Good gentleman helped them. She does not threaten nothing, just needs a vacation. After these words, the young man finally ceased to understand what happened at all. The ancestor stated that he did not understand anything, but he would explain everything when they return home. Chedagum looked at him and said that he was also looking forward to his explanation. Sivan dawned that this is the same kid with the ball. Suddenly, the boy began to cough and blood appeared from his mouth. The children immediately began to worry about him and asked if everything was all right with their older brother. The Celestial did not explain anything, but simply said that it was time for them to go back. The girl exclaimed that they were really familiar, the guy truly protect the heavens, but he objected that they simply intersected once. Suddenly, there was a voice of Hisu's mother, who uncertainly walked in their direction, holding onto the wall. Baby immediately rushed to hug her own person and was incredibly glad that everything was in order with her. The demon, who generally initially brought them to this place, was already traded from such a picture, after which he began to leave, saying that the tiger takes away the tearful children and the obedience eat rice pies. After some time, the young man under the door saw the bags and he dawned on him that he completely forgot about the delivery of food. The dog clarified whether he caught up with a kind of official. Perhaps he was served with tribute. The young man called him a fool and explained that Hisu bought it all. Just the package came and it was left near the entrance. The ancestor was indignant that he was very impudent. He would learn to respect the elders. He can still forgive him bad manners, but let him watch how he addresses him. The guy interrupted him and said to be silent, otherwise he would not get food. Entering the apartment, the ancestor began to adjust him and say that he needed to cook food, as he managed to get very hungry. But Yeonjin objected to wash his paws at first. Then I read a message from Li, who said that I was very grateful to him and again asks for forgiveness. In the future, if any problems arise, then he can safely contact her. Our hero seemed to miss all these words past his ears and answered only that she should not be constantly apologized. During the meal, the young man stated that then, while he was a disconnect, that guy figured out his evil spirit, he also cured his mother Hisu. When the dog confirmed his words, Kwon came to the conclusion that he had missed all the most interesting, after which he asked why he was just standing aside. They almost died. Jin could have figured it out with everything. If that guy had not appeared, then everything could have ended badly. The ancestor replied that, directly speaking, he was not out of his own free will. He had nothing left. Just physically, I couldn't do anything. The young man specified whether he was carrying that sword as a jewelry. The dog replied that in the current situation, yes. Now he has almost completely lost his strength. The guy asked then how he managed to save him from the Sun Gaxi demon. The ancestor replied that this is the main reason. Yeonjin that day was in the balance of death. Therefore, in order to save him, the power that was stored in him, Jin put into his body. Its abnormal regeneration comes from the energy that is inside it. It was because of this that the man repeatedly told him that the young man should help him. He needs to return his strength. Meanwhile, on one of the roofs of neighboring houses, an unknown cultivator from the side watched our heroes. The next day, the guy noted that his whole body was aching. He felt weak. Why so exhausted? Suddenly, the ancestor asked if there were somewhere chronicles or some archives. Simply put, he needs scripture, which describes the history of the development and changes of this world. Yeonjin replied that he realized what he was talking about. When the young man began to delve into the box, Jin specified whether he had a similar source. Kevon replied that if he doubted, then why he asked. Then he put a history textbook in front of him and noted that he was lucky that he had not thrown him out. The ancestor muttered that he could hardly figure out what was written there. After that, our hero said that he had to go to school and his ancestor was left alone with this book. On the way, the young man recalled his words that the force of Jin was inside him. In this case, did he not have to become more resilient? Instead, his body seems heavy all morning. The dog also said that thanks to this force in the future, spirits will not be able to threaten him. The guy did not like it all at all. When the guy passed by some schoolboy, he began to squeak the device on the strap of his backpack. Words such as fatigue, destruction, and battle began to be transmitted immediately by the headphone. The guy immediately directed the detector to our hero, but he showed nothing on the screen. Suddenly, the girls pulled out a smartphone out of his hands and asked who he was taking pictures there. Is it really following them? The young man immediately began to make excuses that he did nothing like that. This program is called a ghost detector. She is to detect spirits. The girl objected that in any case the camera was directed at them. Now she will check his gallery. The young man exclaimed that he did not record anything. The application only observes. Suddenly the Chon Dogan appeared, who asked what he was doing at all. Is it really hunting for ghosts again? Then he asked the girl's forgiveness and said that his friend was obsessed with ghosts. So he paces the school in their search. Their girlfriend immediately took his phone from them and picked up that he had been torn off from reality from early childhood. Let them show patience. The guy told Siobhan that people could misunderstand him. No need to direct the camera because he has a bunch of equipment. The girl demonstrated that this album has only his pictures. He tried so hard to take off a cool selfie. When the schoolgirls left, the girl asked him to stop doing this. Isn't he afraid to get a big one? You cannot pace with the camera. The guy replied that in which case he could explain everything. Leah was indignant that the young man was generally carrying. He had just been accepted for the pursuer. Chon said that you should not swear because it is too strict. The girl was indignant that his behavior was already enraging, and actually she did not swear. Then the guy asked why he chose this particular floor. I didn't even leave the bag in the classroom. Did the young man find something? A friend began to be angry and asked him to stop playing along with him because he was important because of this. The guy stated that this is an erroneous opinion that he was important because of someone else's opinion. He does not take into account anything other than his own observations. Dogan asked, doesn't she remember the trip to the training camp? Then his recorder was able to record the real voice of the ghost. In the record, he said, let's play, or something like that. The girl said he was just stupid. This is ordinary electronics, surely a failure in the waves or something else. The young man recalled that actually there are still electromagnetic interference. Ghosts consist of powerful magnetic fields. What will happen if such a creature passes next to other waves? Light sources begin to flicker, and the equipment fails. The interference makes the device work incorrectly. Leah seems to have some knowledge. A good ghost hunter would come out of it. If he wants, then he can take her as a student. The girl hissed angrily. What other ghosts? He saw them at least once. The young man replied that, of course. With this expression on her face, she looks like them. My friend really wanted to hit him, so she was torn in his direction because he was played quite a bit, and he imagined himself not clear what. Then she asked what a lot about these toys is generally, as if he received some money from this. Suddenly, the device began to squeak. Chon immediately exclaimed that the failure, after all, indicates that there is a ghost. It looks like he is in this class. If he wants, Let him check everything inside. No need to worry because he will agree with the guys. One of the schoolgirls immediately asked who it is next to Dogen. The young man explained that this is Chivon. They are friends from high school. Khan immediately asked if they were against if they need to look into their class for a while. The girls replied that, of course, but they asked what it was on his shoulder. The young man immediately put his hand forward and said that it was better not to touch, since the transmission of a negative charge will entail a breakdown. Meanwhile, our hero read a message from Hisu, who asked him to look into the laboratory. She wants to give something. Only if he comes to his class herself, then the guys can misunderstand everything. When Yeonjin wanted to head towards the exit, he noted that it seemed popular guys blocked the entrance. A friend began to advise him to get out or could go through another exit. Everyone around began to discuss that he would never be able to drive them away. Just pretend to be in the other direction. Dogen realized that they were preventing other people from going through, so he began to carefully push everyone away. Classmates immediately began to admire that our hero just with one glance made his passage. When the young man passed by Siobhan, the device on his shoulder instantly began to work. The young man stated that the detector ghosts reacted again. It seems he found an anomaly source. When the guy met Hisu, she joyfully reported that his mother had made him exactly the same bracelet and ordered him to convey. The young man immediately put him in his pocket and asked to give her thanks. The girl was surprised why he did not put him on. The young man replied that if they wear the same with her, then this can be mistaken for paired bracelets. Lee objected that it was a little one. Does he really think that in their school no one else wears such a thing? It seems that only he can think so. Let him just dress. Mom did because she is worried about him. Suddenly it will become dangerous again. The young man replied that this would not happen anymore. The ancestors said that the ghosts would no longer touch him. When asked why, the young man replied that the force of Jinn is now inside him. That is why it is very quickly restored. Now you just need to live, as usual. The girl muttered that if it was the strength of the ancestors, then everything was clear. Our hero was not at all like himself, as if a completely different person or as if something had instilled into him. The young man fought so cool and held the sword like a gun. He flew straight through the air. Yeonjin asked in surprise when he fought. A friend was surprised that he did not remember anything and clarified that in their temple. Suddenly, the young man fell off his place and sharply grabbed the girl by the face. Then he recoiled back and began to ask her forgiveness, since it was not him. Siwon does not understand how this happened. Suddenly, Siwon appeared in the doorway, who asked for forgiveness and said that their conversation was just so interesting that he overheard a little. Then he introduced himself and said that he was a ghost hunter. He is very pleased to meet Hisu. The young man knows that she is the daughter of the shaman. The girl exclaimed how he knew this. The guy replied that everyone was already knowing about her mother shaman. No need to be so naive. He also knows all the city legends and stories of this school, so he has come here. Whether they heard about a living statue. Among high school students from their school is a very famous legend. The Sanfo statue of high school runs at night. This legend says this. Rumor has it that if you see how she runs, then a person will be forced to participate in the race with her. If you try to be frozen or just not to participate, it will hit a spear in a theme and the opponent will die. Of course, these are all horror stories that are a little predictable. Judging by suspicious signs, this is the work of poltergeist. Sometimes the flagpole is torn out. Moreover, there was no strong gust of wind. Since the ceremony of admission, there have already been 4 such cases. Last year there was the same thing. And more recently, an event took place that made this legend a reality. He accidentally saw something incredible. At first, the young man thought that it just seemed to him, but it looked too realistic. Some guy ran away from the statue, and a girl with her hair gathered in his tail fled behind him. And the most amazing, the flagpole, which was in place in the morning, was torn out. And also, near that statue, the 5th value of EMF was always shown, but after that day, it barely reaches the 1st. You can summarize that from that day, there is nothing more in the statue. Therefore, he will ask directly if they were then near the statue. The guys immediately replied that, of course not. Kon stated that it was them. Usually, if he says something like that, he is rude or ignored, or at least wonders what it all means. And they do neither the first nor the second, but simply immediately began to deny everything said. Their reactions and evidence confirming his guess is the reaction of this EMF. Just in case, it will explain that this is a device for measuring electromagnetic fields. Ghosts are invisible energy consisting of a magnetic field. This device manages to fix them. Our hero asked if there was at least some scientific basis. The interlocutor missed it by his ears and said that he should even hurt him a little. The fifth meaning immediately appears. That is, something that was in the statue is now in it. Yeonjin immediately removed his hand and specified what this was proved at all. Chivon replied that, of course, if only this, then he would not have got it out. But absolutely all of his devices react to a young man. Although, what exactly they fix, he does not yet know. When asked what he wants to say this at all, the guy clarified whether they are the guardians of the ghosts. Kevon replied that even if he said that this is not so, he still won't believe it. In any case, they are in no way connected with either the statue or with anything else. Then, he began to take Hisu from the laboratory. A new friend suddenly asked why he was constantly lying. Then he took out the phone and demonstrated a photo of the guys who ran away from the statue. Modern cameras have quality in the phone, like DSLR, so you can perfectly consider faces from such a distance. The guy is not a bad person, so there is no need to hide it. The girl noted that he had just looked like a real bad person. When asked why the young man actually behaves like that, he replied that he has one request: whether the guys have ever heard anything about the antique perfume store. Meanwhile, Chon Dogan caught up with one of the classmates and handed some kind of box saying that this was a gift. The young man was very surprised and said that for the first time he gets something from the guy from which he is generally. Let him forgive, because the face remembers, but the name is not. The young man was indignant at how he did not remember him. This simply cannot be. Then he began to back and call the young man in rude words. The guy was confused by this behavior, and when he looked into the box that he held in his hands, an ominous aura began to appear from it. Meanwhile, the young man yawned in his mouth and thought about why he was so tired. Suddenly, he received a message from a ghost hunter, so he immediately asked where his number came from. The guy replied that Hisu gave him. Then he began to persuade our hero to go to the antique store with him, or rather, a perfume store. The young man replied that he would walk with Eli because he needs a shaman. But the interlocutor said that she would only go with him. Suddenly, the teacher asked where the deputy headman went. After all, he was just in his place. While the guys thought about what happened to him, the doors opened and Dogan appeared. When the young man walked past his place, the desk neighbor asked where he was going, because he was sitting there. Yeonjin, who watched all this, seemed to be very strange. After the lesson, friends approached him and asked where he was gone at all. He said that he would walk without gaps. The slightly late was not noted. Perhaps he went to the toilet. The young man pulled forward a fist and replied that no. The guys did not understand what kind of movement it was because they had never done so before. Y suggested playing a stone paper for 10,000 won. Classmates objected that he did not have that kind of money. But having thought a little, he still agreed because the money was not bad and wanted to get it. When it turned out that he won, Chon handed him a bill and said that now she rightfully belongs to him. Then he offered to play again, but only for 50,000 won. If there is no money, then it can pay in the body. But this time, the classmate could not win. The winner was Dogan. Suddenly, the guy blew up from his seat and hit his opponent in the face. Then he exclaimed that the man should take risks. Otherwise, what's the point if you follow the same tactics all the time? But the young man did not answer him, as he was in an unconscious state. The guys decided that it was necessary to call a school nurse. Chon asked what they were so nervous because he won and took 10,000 won. Let him only look at his grip. When the classmate objected, wasn't it too much, the guy asked what he was offering him because Dogan really gave him 10,000. This guy, who is now in the disconnection, agreed to pay himself. It seems he also agreed, did not. But then the young man remembered that there was still no and muttered that it was a real bummer. Then he got up and headed towards the exit from the office, and the guys remained completely at a loss. The neighbor of our hero noted that this is like the beginning of school drama about grass. Another said that it seems to him more that this is the beginning of some other story. This is not even Dogan, but a villain who has mitered in him. After some time, the girls discussed what happened to him at all, because for the first time they see him like that, as if a completely different person. Very scary, it seems that he became a bully. One of them, who was secretly in love with him, noted that he said that he was going to a theatre school. Maybe just prepare for listening. When asked why it was generally rehearsed in the classroom, the girl replied that he probably got a bully steering wheel. At this time, a classmate came up to him and said that in fact, smoking is prohibited, the teacher will come soon. The guy shouted sharply that he was generally only, that he mumbled, completely heard nothing. Let it speak louder. Then he put his hand to his head and said that this was not a cigarette. Does he want to argue right now? The young man says that the teacher will come as soon as he calls the call, so the Chon offers to argue for 10,000. And if a young man does not have money, then let him pay his body. But suddenly, Leah appeared in the class, who silently grabbed his hand and began to withdraw from the office. Already in the corridor, she asked that he really hit someone. What is happening to him at all? Where did he get an electronic cigarette from? Because the guy despises smoking. But the young man, it seems, didn't listen to her at all. Then he threw the cube into the air and asked, even or odd? The girl looked at him angrily and said that she now has no mood for all sorts of stupid jokes. But after all, she answered that she was odd and lost. Therefore, Dogen grabbed her face and said to pay her body. Without thinking twice, Leah, that there was strength to hit him in the face, since such behavior was extremely outraged, and left. At this time, Shivon continued to try to persuade Kvon to go to the antique shop with him, but he did not succeed. But the guy decided that he would not do it. They are still in the same space. Then he went in search of him, noted that the detector began to work, which means he is somewhere nearby. Then he began to walk and scream that even if he hides, his equipment for perfumes would still be found by Yeonjin. But suddenly, he ran into Dogen and dropped the determinant of the spirits that he went through from his hands. After a friend took the device in his hands and he began to squeak even more, Kon could not understand what was happening. Perhaps some kind of frequency conflict. Then the ghost hunter asked to call Yeonjin, but instead, the Chon threw the device to the floor with all his might. Then he hissed, "He wants to die or something. If it crashes, then let it apologize. After all, normal people do." When Shivon muttered the word sorry, the young man threw the bones up and asked what hand they were in. Meanwhile, Hisu decided to lay out the cards and she had an image of the demon. Then she reported that his name was translated as a dragon jinn, a ghost hunter. Let him go to the rescue of Dogen. Our hero tiredly asked why he would go out somewhere at all. The girl exclaimed to save her friend. The young man objected that he was not his friend and they were completely not close. Hisu objected that she was still a classmate. The guy asked why she generally decided it because of some card. In the morning he was in order. Now they suddenly be sent to him a ghost or something. Just the character is like that. True at the moment, his behavior is really too strange, but this does not really bother him. The girl sadly asked that if that guy is a really good person, then he will be so painful. For example, if his body is captured like her and he will not be able to do anything. This is so unfair. As a person who studied in the same school as Dogen, she can say one thing. Suddenly, she was interrupted by the appeared Shivon and added that he was really good. He will not even touch anyone with his finger. He does not know how to swear. So kind that it seems to be a character from a fairy tale. He is not even so brave to argue or compete with someone. Then he turned to Yeonjin and asked that he was really running away from the class again. The girl immediately asked what happened to his face. The young man replied that the ghost hit a lot. He will not ask them to go to the antique perfume store, although a little sorry. It also apologizes for what was recently. Hisu just said that, like her, she lost her body not wanting it. After the expulsion of the spirit, whether she was able to return to a normal life. It turns out that if they are not guardians of the spirits, it turns out that they also cleaned the statue. Is it so? While our hero tried to explain that they had nothing to do with it, Lee came from the bank that Shivon transferred her an advance of 50,000. After they finish with their work, the young man will give them as much money as they say. Let them help, please. Our hero replied that he did not want to help someone at all. Let Hisu do it. On the way, Kvon thought that forever she was trying to draw him into something. Recently, he almost died, so he wants to live calmly. Now only caution and no intervention. But when he caught the eye of the young man in the corridor, Yeonjin sharply grabbed him by the T-shirt and stopped him. The girl who wanted to catch up with accidentally found this picture. She noted to herself that he was worth it to be going to expel the spirit. Still, Sivon is very kind. Our hero sharply removed his hand and began to ask for forgiveness, since this, though he was not. The young man objected that this was his hand. If not he, then who else then? Then she threw the bones and asked our hero in which hand they are. The sudden hand of the young man again rose in itself and chose the alleged location of the knuckles. The classmate replied that this was the right choice, but the next time let it be more careful. Some time later, Yeonjin tried to understand what was happening with his limb, until suddenly a hand formed a fist and hit him in the eye. A friend passing by asked what he was doing. That's what, some of his new tricks. Rehearse for the competition of talents on the outbound, or how? When Kevon asked him to hold his hand, the guy asked if he really needed to participate in this absurd performance. It looks terribly. After the guy explained that his hand was moving on its own, another classmate asked if he had an alien's hand accidentally. The symptom is that one of the hands moves without the will of the owner, as if it has its own will, or it is controlled by a certain external force. Our hero noted to himself that this is directly about him. Are there really problems with the brain? Recently, he really hit his head. Plus, everything is so stuck to everything, and the body, therefore, an incomprehensible strong fatigue appeared. When a friend who came up quietly from behind wanted to hit him on the shoulder, the guy abruptly beat off his blow. The young man was very surprised and asked, did he really receive so many times that the body is now reacting on his own? Dogen seems to be from his class. Let him tell him to give him John. When asked what it is, the young man explained that an electronic cigarette. He asked why he could not go to him himself. He replied that laziness. The guy objected, and it means to walk for him because the Chon was already on the way to the 3rd grade. The young man began to get angry and hissed that he told him that he did not need to get him out of himself. Our hero wanted to say again that he went himself, but his hand began to move. Therefore, I immediately replied that he would bring now. Meanwhile, a ghost hunter walked along the corridor with another device in his hands and noticed something strange. All equipment began to work when he went to some box that lay around the corner. Standing behind Dogen, Yeonjin thought perhaps to pretend that he was not in the know. But then, this person will again pester him. The young man asked why he was standing behind him and staring at him. Perhaps he came to argue. The guy replied that no. Chon Si-hoo said he owed him something. It seems to have taken something from his personal belongings. Dogen realized that he was talking about an electronic cigarette, which he gave so as not to get a blow to the face. But did he agree to return it? Perhaps the young man came precisely in order to get instead of him. Our hero asked what joy it was. Let it leave her for himself then, because he does not need her. Dogen immediately jumped up, threw up the knuckles up, and said that he would give out if he guesses what number is in his hand, even or odd. The young man objected again that he could not give him a cigarette. It is generally unprofitable for him. Why all this at all? But the young man lost his temper and yelled so that he simply played immediately. As a result, our hero replied that there should be an even number, but it turned out that this was not so. When the young man swung in order to strike him on the head, Yeonjin's hand hesitated him. Then she made him a slow burn of such a force that the guy even flew off a certain distance. Everyone who attended this picture was shocked, including our hero.